So I'm Wendy Maxwell. I'm a language teacher and as well a teacher trainer. I'm an author and the founder of AIM, which is AIM Language Learning is what we call our company right now. But AIM stands for the Accelerative Integrated Methodology that I developed in my classroom over the course of about 10 years, working with students in a core French environment. AIM is now used all over the world in different languages as well, as you can see here. Um, I have written resources for French, second language, English as well, Spanish, and then Mandarin and Japanese were co-authored by our representative in Australia, where Mandarin and Japanese are often taught. I've traveled all over the world giving workshops to teachers and won a few awards as well. So um, I love this quote because it really represents why I developed AIM. I remember speaking to a teacher who once said to me, "Oh, I taught clothing last year in September, and this year, the next year's teacher says, well, her students don't remember anything about clothing." Well, it really is so important as language teachers. We work very, very hard to help our students acquire a language. It's so important to focus upon the fact that we are ensuring that they are learning. It really, we can teach everything, but if they're not learning, then unfortunately it's a waste of time for everyone who is participating in the classroom experience. So my focus is on ensuring that students actually learn what we are teaching. And so my goal is for the development of authentic proficiency in the classroom, and certainly AIM has had great success at developing that. So let's have a little look at a few classes in different languages learning AIM, learning their language through AIM. Just a moment here. I'm just going to ensure that when I share, we hear the sound. There we go. All right.
Everyone will
do
do
the
song
Non, ta grand-mère. Parce que c'est la grand-mère de Chaperon Rouge et la mère par Chaperon Rouge. Alors c'est ta grand-mère.
To the monde est fantastique.
La classe toma. Yo tomo.
Una persona importante. Importante o importante? Importante. Importante. Entonces, yo no hablo con tú. Okay.
Contigo.
Oh, sí.
我要找一个歌手，小鸡住在农场里，一天小鸡出上学，一个小国家在小鸡的桌上。怎么了？哎呀，天塌了，天塌了！怎么了？你去哪里？天塌了，天塌吗？我不在啦。
We can see lots of engagement, lots of students speaking constantly in the classroom. That's one thing you'll notice about an AIM classroom when you walk in. It's a very lively, active, interactive place. AIM aligns very beautifully, actually, with the CEFR, upon which many of the new curriculum guidelines are based all over the world. I won't go into a lot of detail, but with respect to that, but we do have research papers and other presentations that show how AIM is supported by research and how it aligns beautifully with the CEFR. What I do want to mention, though, is that AIM is a comprehensible input-based approach. A lot of the strategies and techniques we use ensure that students rapidly understand, because really it indeed is the way to develop a foundation for proficiency. First and foremost, comprehension, and also not only comprehensible input, but also comprehensible output. We focus a lot on both. We have a content and language integrated learning focus. So My background as an immersion teacher led me to understand how effective it is to teach a language through another subject area. So with AIM, we teach through an arts and literacy-based approach, and a lot of the skills that the students learn in an AIM classroom are transferable to their English first language classroom. And our primary goal from the very beginning of the development of AIM was and continues to be to develop authentic proficiency, both oral and written. So I'd love to know a little bit more about you. And so if you wouldn't mind, because I do gear the workshops, the webinar presentations about AIM, if appropriate and if possible, around the specific needs of those attending. So if you wouldn't mind just writing a little bit about who you are, how you, if you'd like, how you found out about AIM, but most particularly what you teach, what languages you teach, what grades you teach, and where you are located. I'd really appreciate that very much. It'll give me a little more context in making sure I'm meeting your needs today and addressing your own particular situations. So AIM is used all over the world. Oh, and you can write that information in the chat. Hopefully you can locate that. It's either along the bottom or the top of the screen. AIM is used in many schools all over the world. It started, well, I started to develop AIM in 1993 and was almost fully developed by 2003, about 10 years. And then in 2004, we created AIM Language Learning. And as through AIM Language Learning, a lot of resources and specific training levels were developed. And now, as I mentioned, it's used all over the world, primarily in Canada, but also in the United States, in fairly extensively in the Netherlands as well, and Australia. And yeah, I mean, to a lesser degree in other parts of the world as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the research. AIM was, as I mentioned, started in about 2004, AIM Language Learning, and it sort of took off in Canada, in the Netherlands, and Australia as well. A recent study out of the Netherlands showed that students in AIM classes outperform students in other programs in all language skills, and the other most popular programs used in the Netherlands. And this research paper that was published in the Journal of European Second Language Acquisition won the best research paper of the year in 2022. Last October, the Dutch students were rated the best in the country, those that were in AIM classes. And various teachers in the United States have also won national competitions with their students. So thank you very much, Cherise, for letting me know you're a teacher in the Greater Toronto Area and you teach core French. Perfect. So lovely. I love teaching core French. That is where I developed AIM. That is really my area of greatest expertise, although I have taught in bilingual programs and immersion programs right through the grades. But that's wonderful. AIM is just fantastic for core French. All right, and thank you, Danushika. You're a primary teacher in Melbourne. Lovely. And you've always been interested in navigating AIM. Okay. Oh, I'm so glad your school is interested. So there are a number of schools in the Netherlands, in Australia that use AIM, as I mentioned. Jen McKinney's over there helping teachers and training teachers. And yeah, lovely. That's wonderful. And thank you, Jean-Charles. So glad you also let us know what you're doing, a French primary school teacher in France, and you teach in an international school. Fantastic. There is a good number of international schools that use AIM. And you teach the new coming students and help them adapt to French in their school. Oh, lovely. And you heard about AIM because you taught 1 year in Ontario. Yes, okay. Well, AIM has certainly been for many years now widely used across Ontario. So, well, thank you very much. I'm sure it's nice for everyone else to know who is in the group today. So we're really definitely a French-focused group. So I will make sure that I focus on that in this workshop. I really appreciate that. So the research on AIM out of the University of Groningen, as I mentioned, was voted the best research paper of the year, and you can access it here. And if you like, I can just send you a link directly to it as well. So I'm going to be talking about the different AIM strategies that are supported by research, which at the same time will describe to you a lot about the methodology and how it works. So one of the most important strategies, AIM strategies, is the use of what we call pared down language. Basically, it's the most high frequency functional vocabulary to get the students an easy entry to the language, but also gives them the words that they need for actual development of proficiency at the early stages. Language is so big, so we really help hone in on a selected vocabulary that has shown to really, really work. So part of the pared down language is the fact that the words are a very high frequency. But the other part for French teachers is the regularized stem of the verb, whereby we teach in the same amount of time, instead of teaching through a verb, je peux, tu peux, il peut, elle peut, on peut, nous pouvons, vous pouvez, ils peuvent, elles peuvent. We're teaching peut, doit, aime, sait, regarde, écoute, prend, donne, écrit, and so on. So we teach a lot of meaning rather than form initially. We focus a lot on cognates. Now, just to back up, it doesn't mean we don't teach form, we do, but we teach it in a very specific way through a three-step inductive approach, which I won't get into, but what we are doing through this regularized stem is getting an early entry and an easy entry to the language. So the students are using the regularized stem. So for example, peut is the gesture we use, peut. So they can say je peux, tu peux, il peut, elle peut, on peut, tout le monde peut, and la classe peut, with just putting aside the nous and vous form at first to allow students to speak correctly without a lot of different forms to deal with. It is a really beautiful and effective way to get students speaking in the language early, very early. We use cognates, of course, all language teachers do that to help students sort of, if it's possible. And then AIM is a very verb-centered approach. I have learned over the years that although teaching nouns is important, verbs are primordial. They are absolutely essential for the acquisition of a language. So there's a very high frequency on high focus and frequency of use of verbs. We teach a lot of other verbs, words as well. We teach nouns, we teach adjectives, of course, subjects, question words, and many, many, many linking words. In fact, those are also very key to the pared down language. Now, the way we contextualize the language and the way we help students rapidly understand the language by seeing, hearing, saying, and sometimes kinesthetically embedding the language, the vocabulary that we teach, is through the innovative gesture approach. So gestures allow us to pass directly to meaning. So when students can understand a language, and for example, if I didn't understand Mandarin and the teacher said to me, ni hao, I might try to relate it to my knee or something that's familiar. But as soon as the teacher says, ni hao, okay, I get it. Those arbitrary sounds mean this. So by using the gesture approach, we're helping the students understand very, very quickly. But that's not the only thing that the gesture approach offers. When we are gesturing as teachers, we are asking the students to speak. So even long before students are capable of speaking independently, in fact, from the very first moment they enter the AIM classroom, the students are speaking as the teacher gestures for them to communicate. And bit by bit, we teach them more words and gestures that together, and the students who are speaking then after a while as we gesture. So they're getting maximum practice with the language, maximum comfort. The weak students, the shy students, the strong students are all speaking together at once. So let's have a look just at a teacher. Well, let's have a look quickly at a couple of these things. The first is not the teacher not using AIM in the classroom, but sharing things.
Aujourd'hui, je suis très excitée parce que la semaine prochaine, je vais visiter mon ami qui habite à Winnipeg. C'est vrai, je suis née à Winnipeg et toute ma famille habite à Winnipeg. J'ai 2 sœurs et j'ai ma maman et mon papa qui habitent là. Alors ma maman est tellement contente que je visite Winnipeg la semaine prochaine.
Okay, so it's lovely. She's sharing things about herself. The one thing, though, we don't know whether the students are listening, but we don't know whether they're understanding, whether they're not getting practice with the language. This is how an AIM teacher would do the same thing.
Pardon? Winnipeg. Excellent. Alors, je vais continuer maintenant.
Est-ce que tout le monde sait ou ne sait pas que je suis né à Winnipeg? Je sais,
C'est
vrai, je suis né là-bas et j'ai aussi des amis que je peux visiter là-bas aussi.
So we can see that the teacher is sharing things naturally. It's spontaneous interaction. The students are doing the speaking on her behalf. So they're getting lots of practice. They're engaged. They are showing the teacher that they're at the very least able to understand the words. There are a lot of things we do as well to ensure that we confirm that the students are understanding what we're gesturing, but we're seeing a lot of active participation and practice with the language that's really keeps the students attentive. So that was a look at what the gesture approach is like. Now, I'll show you do a little bit of a demonstration to show you how I might introduce something else to the class. So we might say, Bonjour tout le monde maintenant. Now, maintenant, la classe commence. Et tout le monde parle, bla 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 bla, en français. Très, très bien. So when I did the gesture maintenant, I also sandwich with now. Maintenant, now, maintenant. So for those gestures that are not quite as iconic, not quite as natural, sometimes what I will do is I will sandwich in that way as I'm beginning to teach the language to the students. That's one of the strategies I use to ensure that students are understanding. In most cases, the gestures are very natural and iconic. Regarde. Just 1 minute, I will stop sharing here. Regarde, écoute, écrit, marche, cours, cours, saute, saute. Others that are nouns, which are crayon or livre or chaise or what else might we have? A feuille de papier are also very iconic, but some like maintenant or aujourd'hui might not be, so I will sandwich those to make sure very quickly, just almost subliminal, just giving a little target language English or first language target language in between to help students understand rapidly. We do everything we can to help provide that comprehensible input. So the fourth strategy, providing a literacy and arts-based approach, helps us contextualize the vocabulary in a really meaningful way. And it's a lot of what we do is based on what David Booth, who is a literacy and drama in the classroom expert, believed the best way to develop literacy skills is not by trying to do as many cover as many stories as possible. And he's talking about an English or any first language classroom. I think his ideas apply even better to a second language or foreign language classroom environment. He said to go in, out, and around a story, delve deeply into one story over a longer period of time, rather than trying to do a whole bunch of different stories. This, he felt, would develop much better literacy skills. And I really think that not only does it develop better literacy skills, but in a second language context, it brings this wonderful, deeply context embedded environment that students new to a language really, really need and thrive in. So with AIM, what I'm doing is helping students work with story, which leads to a theater piece, which becomes creative drama, which is also linked to music and choreography, also both all very, very engaging for students. And this quote by David is really, I think, really sums up a lot of what we do in an AIM classroom. Children new to a language find in a story context for understanding. It's not word lists that command their attention, but the lives of characters that fill the tales they read or listen to. And how painful it must be for those children alien to a language to sit day after day without feeling connected to what is happening in the classroom. And yet, through storying, how quickly they enter the activity, making sense of what is happening, building their own versions, listening, telling, retelling, talking about, reflecting upon, responding. So it's just a lovely quote that really helps us to see how beneficial delving into a story can be. So this is one of the AIM stories, just a very short excerpt of it. AIM stories typically, once they become theater pieces, take about 10 to 12 minutes to perform. So they're significant pieces. But this is one excerpt of one of our French stories, an African folk tale.
Le guépard arrive à la maison du lion. Il parle avec lui.
Monsieur Lion, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? Il ne pleut pas depuis longtemps. Tout le monde a très soif. C'est un gros problème. Est-ce que tu peux nous aider?
D'accord, Guépard. Tu dois aller à l'arbre Ungali, un arbre magique qui est loin d'ici dans la forêt. Tu dois dire le nom de l'arbre et après ça, l'arbre peut aider les animaux. Dis à l'arbre que tout le monde a soif parce qu'il n'y a pas d'eau. N'oublie pas, c'est l'arbre Ungali.
Oh, merci, Monsieur Lion. Merci. Je cours à l'arbre maintenant. Au revoir.
So, yeah, this is a lot of our stories at the early step kits are very repetitive. So we make sure, again, that comprehensible input is simple and easy enough for the students to learn pretty quickly, learn the story quickly. The stories are filled with a lot of emotional language as well, which is very helpful. And some of the stories even contain patterning, rhythm, and rhyme to help students acquire the language and remember the words easily. But patterning, rhythm, and rhyme occur throughout a lot of what we do in AIM. So many songs and raps and dances, even some of the activities like work with opposites have patterning and rhythm and rhyme. We have as well certain raps that we use that segue from one activity to the next, which contain rhythm and rhyme. Even the gestures themselves, like maintenant, aujourd'hui, fantastique, we call beat gestures, which have some rhythm to them. And so this also helps a lot with language acquisition. So let's have a look at one of our raps that one of our activities that we do with some rhythm that work with les contraires. Like going as well.
Maintenant, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? Dire et danser les contraires. Tout le monde a un partenaire. Frappe des mains et on commence. 1, 2, 3, 4. En haut, en bas. En haut, en bas. Fini. Commence. Fini. Commence. Très mal. Très bien. Très mal. Très bien. Se rappelle. Oublier. Se rappelle. Oublier.
Okay, we'll stop there. I just want to give you a little excerpt of just one of the very, very many ways that we target the language for rapid language acquisition. The sixth strategy that we use is and it's a big focus of AIM, is the use of questioning techniques. So we have scaffolded questioning. We have total and partial questions. Total are the simpler, they contain the answer within, and partial questions are the questions that begin with qui, quand, comment, qu'est-ce que, quel, combien de, and so on. The total and partial questions, because they're gestured by the teacher for the students to say, as everything we gesture, maximize language production in a scaffold in a supportive manner. But because this teacher is gesturing the questions, the students are practicing how to question, which is one of the most high frequency interactions that students have in a classroom. They're asking teacher a question, they're asking their peers a question, so they need to know how to question. So in AIM, we gesture for the students to learn how to question, and then we wait for them to tell us that they are able to respond. And we focus a lot on maximizing vocabulary. Students must speak and respond in complete thought sentences. So this will help develop, that really scaffolds toward their effective ability to write long stories, for example. So let's practice a little bit of AIM's questioning techniques here. And Nada, if you want to let us know where you're from and what you teach, what languages you teach, that would be just fantastic. You can write that in the chat. So, for example, I might say, if we're working on the Three Little Pigs, les trois petits cochons. Est-ce que le premier petit cochon fait une maison de paille, straw, paille ou brique? And then the class has to say, le premier petit cochon fait une maison de briques. And so the students are following along as the teacher gestures, but gradually there's this release of responsibility and the students answer on their own as a whole class. So they're all practicing together. No one is singled out. Everyone gets lots of practice. So the seventh strategy are the scaffolded language manipulation activities that I've developed to ensure that students are we're gradually releasing that responsibility to them to manipulate the language in increasingly more challenging and independent ways, right out to their ability at the end of the kit to write creative stories of anywhere between 5 to 10 pages or more. And that's in the first year of language. I'm just going to have a quick look at Nada. Oh, Nada, thank you for letting us know. Well, I apologize. I was also late coming in with technical difficulties. So that's great. Thank you for joining us, and nice to hear you're from Toronto. I'm going to assume that most likely you teach elementary French, but if you want to let me know, that would be lovely. So the eighth strategy is that the fact that we work a lot when the students are working in creative writing or anything that we are doing in the language through a cooperative learning approach. We want the students to always be working together as they are developing their language skills. As a whole class, when I'm gesturing, the students are working on games or other activities alongside or with my support, with my gestured support. That's very cooperative. But once they're working also in partners, the students are supporting each other as they're writing, discussing as they're writing. We always want them to develop their oral language skills in tandem with their written. They are never sitting silent in a classroom as they are working together.
Oui. Il faut te mettre en salle et déchirer.
Est-ce que ça, c'est la même histoire, mais dans les mots différents? Oh oui. Dans les mots différents?
Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire?
Est-ce que tu fais en partenaire ou
Saute.
beaucoup? Est-ce que tu fais
très pauvre.
Est-ce que tu fais ça?
Est-ce que c'est sans? Non, ça c'est juste une maison.
Tu fais ça?
Louis commence à marcher dans la forêt. Il espère trouver une amie dans la forêt. Elle a demandé
En train de... Oh, excellent. En train de...
ici.
3 mots. En train de.
Après, il a triché avec un accent aigu. La petite chaperon rouge est partie le
So we can see that the students are sitting at desks or tables and just working in partners, typically partners, sometimes a group of 3, but it's rare. We want to maximize participation. So partners is the best way to do that. And they're discussing as they write. We do a lot of creative work with the language as well. Based on the templates and models that we provide in the AIM kits, the students are asked through the modeling of the teacher to eventually be very creative on their own. So here's a rap that some students wrote. And all these students you're seeing actually are either from Ontario, like these students here, or the ones in the last clip are from Vancouver.
Aujourd'hui, la classe commence et tout le monde pense et danse. Quand j'entre dans la classe française, je ne parle pas en anglais. On parle en français, c'est fantastique. La Bengali a bien appris. Je parle en français, c'est très très bien. Je fais les actions avec mes mains. En agresseur, ça c'est vrai. Mot. Word.
So it's great to see these grade 8 boys enjoying French, proud of what they're accomplishing in, taking things that are of interest to them, like that beat that they're creating there, they're taking ownership of this creative activity. It's really wonderful to see. And it was all based upon the original model that AIM provided, which is our rap d'entrée, our entry rap. And then out of that, we show teachers how to work with rhyme and rhythm with the students, do a brainstorming activity, the whole class writes a rap, and then eventually their own. The other strategies that we use, there are a few more. Strategy number 9 is target language only and AIM systems to support. My belief is, and my experience has been, that if students are speaking in English or their first language in a French classroom, they are not going to be able to learn French. It sounds kind of logical, but we see a lot of French classrooms where students are using English, unfortunately. So AIM is very much an immersive approach, and we do support you with a lot of different techniques, strategies, and even systems to support your exclusive, your requirement that students use French exclusively. And through our training and through our kits, you'll find out all about these different strategies and techniques. And some of them you've learned about today, of course, as well. Like the pared down language, like the simplification of the language, like the gesturing to have students practice speaking constantly, and so that they can apply that to when they're off working with a partner only in the target language. Scaffolding is a very important part, I think, of any successful program or methodology that a teacher uses, and AIM is deeply scaffolded in every aspect of what we do, whether it's the scaffolding of the teaching of individual words as we're doing that bit by bit from lesson to lesson, whether it's the scaffolding of the actual language manipulation activities that allow students to find success at each level along the way, right out to the creative activities. We want to make sure, and even the way we scaffold for teachers to understand how to implement AIM effectively is another thing that we offer to through this methodology. The 11th strategy, well, a lot of teachers ask, how do you teach grammar? Because you're not focusing a lot on conjugation and analysis of the language at first. Well, we do that as we move through the different step kits. AIM, as I mentioned before, has a 3-step inductive approach to the teaching of language. At first, we are just simply gesturing the different aspects of the language. So I'm going to just demonstrate to you a little bit about that. So let's take masculine and feminine. So we might say, il, this is a little mustache for the he, il, and this is elle. This is actually from the American Sign Language gesture for she. So il and elle. Il est content. Elle est contente. So we add that gender gesture relating to the elle form that signals that additional sound. Il est grand. Elle est, this is a here, est is a grande. So with that additional gender gesture, the students understand that something is added when it's a feminine form. Well, of course, it's going to apply to anything that's feminine or in French because everything has a gender in French. And then we have the infinitive. Well, how do we work with infinitives? Again, just naturally, as we move through a gesture for the students to say, we don't explain it at first, but they inductively generate the rule themselves. So we'll start, for example, il marche, il va marcher. Oh, there's an additional gesture for that additional infinitive ending. Elle saute. Elle doit sauter. And that applies to the ir and the war and the re forms as well. Every single infinitive has an R in it. I won't go over all of them, but just to let you know, we do have different gestures that identify aspects of grammar. And then in the second step, we do targeted gesture reviews on aspects of grammar. And then finally, we work on the règles en rap. We have a lot of rap rules that patternize the language down into one simple rap. And that rap is only really applicable if a student's already have the language. So here we see students in a Toronto classroom, core French, 30 or 40 minutes a day, I'm not sure which it was, working on talking about the language, but in the language. And these students are in grade 4 and 5.
Corrige les erreurs. Le numéro. Tout le monde lit avec madame. 1, 2, 3. Est-ce que tu peux chanter avec il? Qui voit une faute dans la phrase numéro 1? Oui.
Chante doit être chanté parce que après peut, c'est l'infinitif.
D'accord. Tout le monde, on va répéter la règle et c'est la règle numéro 1. Tout le monde va connaître. Après à comment, pour ou de, toi aime et aussi peu. C'est mon va où je vais, c'est l'infinitif qu'on doit utiliser. Fantastic.
So there you got a chance to just hear the règle en rap that identifies all the words in French that signal the infinitive form, all wrapped up into one. So a lot of teachers and other educators of different types have looked at AIM and have used AIM. Gary Karkin used AIM at the University of Southern New Hampshire to teach adults who are new immigrants to the United States with our adult English kit. The 12th strategy is the use of incorporating emotional language into our teaching. This enhances language acquisition up to 500 times more effectively. So we'll see a lot of emotional language come through in the gestures themselves. I'm not just going to say fantastique, I'm going to say fantastique. Or I'm not just going to say cours, 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 I'm going to say cours, 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 cours. And the stories themselves and the theater pieces that we have are filled with emotional language. The songs, the raps, so much of what we do contains a lot of emotional language, and that is why students also rapidly acquire the language with AIM, the pared down language. Strategy 13, AIM works on a hierarchical approach. We ensure a lot of repetition, and it's repetition in a very specific way. As I mentioned early in this webinar, we're not a thematic approach where we sort of move from one set of nouns to another set of nouns to another set of nouns, and then don't revisit those nouns, you know, until maybe the next year. Let's say we're working on clothing, and well, you don't work on clothing again until the next year. Well, by that time, the students have forgotten the words for clothing. AIM works in a very different way. We teach high frequency words the first lesson, and then you teach those words and gestures to your students. And after that, you go back and repeat the words that you taught in the first lesson. Then the third lesson, you're going to teach more words and gestures, and you go back and you repeat the words and gestures you introduced in the second and first lesson. In the fourth lesson, you teach more words and gestures, and then you go back and repeat what you taught in the first, second, and third lessons. You're constantly going back and repeating and reviewing the most high frequency vocabulary, which is introduced first, most often. So this hierarchical approach is really what helps students have enough exposure and enough repetition to the words of the pared down language to actually acquire them very rapidly. The 14th strategy, nonverbal communication and positive reinforcement. AIM is all about creating a very positive learning environment. And there's so many studies have shown how this absolutely affects learning. And we talk a lot about this in our workshops, how to ensure this can happen. It's not difficult because with AIM, your students are learning so much so quickly that it's very easy to be praising them a lot and being very positive, of course. Strategy 15, we want to limit our activities to 10 minutes maximum, and then we switch to a different type of activity. So whether it's a gesture review, whether it's reading the story, whether it's doing a dance, whether it's playing a game, whatever it might be, we're switching it up. Maximum 10 minutes. For the little ones, it's actually 5 or 6 minutes. This, studies have shown, keeps the brain alert and absolutely maximizes language acquisition. I have a whole series of, well, I have a paper actually that if you're interested in, with all of the supporting research studies that we've talked about here and many more studies that support what we've talked about today on our website, which you are welcome to download and share if you like, or just look at yourself. So I talked about why AIM works, how it works, but it's important to show that it works. And so I'm going to just finish up this webinar with some results that will hopefully show you what we can do with AIM. AIM develops very rapidly oral language skills, which is sometimes more difficult to develop than written language skills. But if you can develop oral language skills quickly, what I find is the transfer, especially if it's English to French, is immediate. And the students can write, even if it's inventive spelling or the spelling isn't perfect. We work on that in AIM. But the students are able to write very quickly if they're able to speak well. And so we focus on oral language development at first, of course. So this is one of my students in a core French class in Toronto. After about 80 hours of instruction, so we were at the second step, we were actually in the second step kit. This is a step 1 kit, but we had used a different step 1 kit at the beginning of the year. So at the end of this year, after about 80 hours, the student wrote her story retelling. And so she wrote a retelling of Le Chat et la Lune. Now, the story retelling process is modeled extensively by the teacher, and then the students go off and work with a partner and create their own story retelling, not copied based on what the class did, but of course, with the modeling, the students come to understand it. What they have to do is use circumlocution to rewrite the story in their own words without repeating any sentence from the original story that we've been working on over the course of the kit. So you can see this is pretty good. Un bonjour, un petit chat regarde dans l'eau. Oh non, qu'est-ce que je fais? Un hibou vole dans le ciel, le hibou regarde le chat. Qui est petit? Bonjour, dit le hibou. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Oh, la lune est tombée dans l'eau. Je ne sais pas. Qu'est-ce que je peux faire? So, you know, it's not perfect, but after all, it's just core French 30 minutes a day at the end of the first year. So it's pretty good for that age and that amount of French exposure. Now, we also have examples right up through to grade 11. It's exactly the same process. This is in Peel, a teacher in Peel, Mississauga. after 75 hours of instruction. Of course, in grade 11, students are writing so much more at that age than they would have had exposure writing in grade 1. So the stories are much longer, much more accurate, much more attention to spelling and punctuation and grammar, of course, and much more detail as well. So, yeah, so that's a Spanish example, but the process is the same, whether it's French or Spanish, English, Mandarin, or even Japanese. The students are following the same process with the teacher. But of course, for a Japanese student, they have to learn the script as well. So we're not going to see the 10-page stories or 5-page stories from grade 1s in Japanese. I'm so thrilled to even see that the student wrote 1.5 pages within a short period of time in Japanese. Down to grade 7, this is a Vancouver student, L'Arbre Ngali, in, again, the first year of French, doing another story retelling based on L'Arbre Ngali. And again, unlike the grade 1 student that was a lot shorter, a grade 7 student, because they've developed language skills in the first language, are able to write something much more detailed and much longer. Okay. Now, the next story that we do, as you know, as I mentioned before, AIM is a literacy-based approach. So we focus a lot on the development of literacy skills, and it's beautiful to see what the students can produce with respect to their retellings. But we also want very, very creative stories that are the students' own story, but still scaffolded based on the original story for the kids. For example, Les Trois Petits Cochons. These 2 grade 1 students of mine wrote, so these students one of the students had me in kindergarten with AIM, and the other student had just started with AIM in grade 1. We had 30 minutes a day of French. And in this story extension, the students write, Qu'est-ce qui se passe après? What happens at the end of the AIM kit story, and continue it. So these students wrote, Après que le loup sort de Les Trois Petits Cochons, il va à la maison et dort, et se réveille et marche à la blase, et court et marche. Monsieur Loup est très fou et content. Et le loup frappe à la porte de la fille amie. Il dit à son ami, Est-ce que tu veux danser avec moi? Oui, je veux, je aime toi. L'ami dit, Est-ce que tu veux aller à ma maison? Le loup dit, Oui, oui, je veux. Le cochon est ici, dit le loup. Oups, there we go, sorry. J'ai peur, dit la fille amie. Elle court à sa maison. Oui, je veux aller à ma maison. Est-ce que tu veux aller à ma maison? Oui, je veux aller à ta maison, dit le loup. Je veux faire une fête, dit la fille amie. Le loup dit oui, 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 je veux. Est-ce que tu veux manger avec moi? Oui, le loup dit oui, oui, oui. So she goes on. They go on and on. I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can see lots of repetition in there. You can see some good spelling, some very inventive spelling, because of course, over 90% of the day, the students are in English learning how to spell, not in French. So here we have ça c'est délicieux. So what we can see here is it is direct oral to written. They're just writing as they think it's spelled in some cases. In other cases, that's words that they've seen a lot, so they can spell them correctly. And we have other work with that we offer students in our high school AIM kits. A lot of teachers in the Netherlands and in the United States use our high school AIM kits. And so we offer the opportunity to do story retellings based on other stories that students read, whether it's AIM, published little readers, or other readers that they write or that they read elsewhere, from elsewhere. This student from Missouri wrote not Qu'est-ce qui se passe après, but Qu'est-ce qui se passe avant. So the student wrote about 1,000 words in her second step kit after about 100 or so, maybe 80 hours of instruction. She wrote this Qu'est-ce qui se passe avant. And finally, we're going to finish the session today just listening to a student being interviewed. Basically, it's similar to a DELF-like test that the student was working on here, and the teacher is just asking her a series of questions. Now, these questions are found in the AIM kits, so you can actually engage in these.
Bonjour, comment t'appelles-tu?
Je m'appelle Saskia.
Comment ça va?
Ça va bien, merci et toi.
Ça va très bien, merci. Quel temps fait-il aujourd'hui?
Il pleut.
Est-ce que tu es un garçon ou une fille?
Je suis une fille.
Est-ce que tu aimes ou n'aimes pas chanter?
Comme ci, comme ça.
Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Ça, c'est une crayon.
Est-ce que c'est un chien ou une maison?
Ça, c'est un chien.
Est-ce que le chien court ou marche?
Le chien court.
Et est-ce que c'est un garçon ou un chat?
Il est un chat, mais peut-être le chat est un garçon.
Est-ce que le chat saute ou mange?
Le chat mange.
Qu'est-ce que tu vois ici?
Je vois un garçon qui joue de basketball.
Qu'est-ce que la fille ouvre?
La fille ouvre une porte.
Pourquoi est-ce qu'elle ouvre la porte?
Parce qu'elle rentre à la maison, mais peut-être elle va à l'école.
Qui est-ce que tu vois ici?
Je vois une fille et des parents, et les parents disent au revoir à la fille parce que la fille va à l'école.
Et où est l'école?
L'école est à Toronto parce que ça c'est la troisième.
Où est ton école? Est-ce que ton école est à Toronto, à Paris?
Mon école est à Toronto.
Comment s'appelle ton école?
Ça s'appelle Maven.
Et est-ce que ton école est grande ou petite?
Mon école est très petite.
Combien de personnes, combien d'élèves est-ce qu'il y a à ton école?
150.
Oh, très bien, tu sais combien de personnes il y a, bravo. Qu'est-ce que ta mère ou ton père dit quand tu vas à l'école?
Ma mère et mon père disent ciao ciao Mickey Mouse.
Ça, c'est très amusant. Et qu'est-ce que tu leur dis? Qu'est-ce que tu dis à tes parents?
Je dis rien.
Oh, tu ne dis rien, tu ne parles pas, tu es silencieuse. Est-ce que tu aimes ou n'aimes pas aller à l'école?
Comme ci, comme ça.
Comme ci, comme ça, je pensais que tout le monde aime l'école. Est-ce que tu aimes lire? Est-ce que tu aimes écrire les histoires?
J'aime lire et écrire les histoires.
Très bien, merci Saskia.
Et j'aime les singes aussi.
Oh oui, tu aimes les singes, oui, je me rappelle ça. Et ton singe s'appelle Ifa, n'est-ce pas?
Oui.
Et tu aimes faire des robes pour ton singe. Tu aimes coudre les robes pour ton singe.
Oui.
Merci.
De rien.
Au revoir.
All right, so we see a lot of interaction possible here. The student seems to feel pretty comfortable in the language. This is a Toronto school, student core French, grade 5, 30 minutes a day of French. So yeah, we can see that she is fairly easy interaction, and she is using complete thoughts in her responses, which is a strategy we use with AIM, ensuring complete thoughts and maximizing language production. So we just completed our virtual summer institute for the core French component and French immersion grades 3 and up. We do have another summer institute coming up in August for exclusively kindergarten to grade 2 French immersion and francisation, which I should have mentioned there. If you're interested, we do have that with Anne Chiasson, but it is specific to kindergarten to grade 2 French immersion. We have our Winnipeg workshop coming up, our Vancouver Fall Institute, our online gesture practice. I will be coming to Toronto, for those of you who are in Toronto, in November to give a workshop, a level 1 workshop, just one day on Friday. It's just the part 1 of the level 1 workshop. So if you're interested, I would love to see you there. Yeah, so I have my online gesture practice throughout the fall. So if you are interested in knowing more about AIM or finding out about our resources or training, I would love to help you out. We could have a chat on the phone or Zoom, or we could do it by email as well. So do you have any questions at all at this time? Anything at all? Charisse, you asked, so for teachers new to AIM like myself, what would you recommend the first step? So the first step would be to get access to a training of some sort. So I believe you're from Ontario, Cherise, so you could come in theoretically in Toronto to my workshop the beginning of November 7th. Or you can get access to our asynchronous on-demand training. So that is just a workshop that we have as a recording that you can have for 6 months, and you can review it and go back and have a look at it at your leisure and train that way. A lot more teachers seem to be training and liking training that way. And then you also would need a step 1 kit. And so depending on your grade, I can recommend the step 1 kit. If you have kindergarten to grade 2, La Poule Ma Boule kit would be best. If you have grade 3, 4, 5, 6, you could do even grade 7, you could do Les Trois Petits Cochons. It seems to have the broadest scope of applicability, the most popular. And if you have grade, middle school, 7, 8, Le Garçon qui joue des tours, or high school, Salut mon ami, or Une table pour deux. Good. So yeah, so those would, just a kit and some training is basically how you would begin. If you do training, you will get a discount on the kit as well, so on a couple of kits. And if you teach 30 minutes to 40 minutes a day, then you would be able to do 2 kits a year. But, you can always just start with 1 and see how it goes. So, yeah, any other questions at all? Anything at all? Okay, well, I'll be reaching out with the recording of this session to give that to you for your review. And then if you have any questions at that time, you can let me know by email. I'm happy to answer any questions or provide a no obligation quote if you'd just like to show your administrator this, or I can provide, other information or meet with your administrator. I can provide research to support AIM. Anything at all you need, I'm happy to provide that for you. So I guess I'll formally end the session today, and thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad you were able to attend, and hope to see you at a workshop sometime soon. It would be lovely to meet you. Oh, and Cherise, does the asynchronous course cover classroom? Oh, yes. AIM does a lot of work on classroom management. And in fact, I have to say, when you implement AIM, the classroom management just naturally, by the way AIM works, is embedded in what we do. Now, a lot of the strategies and techniques of AIM are specific to classroom management, but just the fact that you implement AIM and the level of focus and engagement, it naturally begins. You will find that challenges with classroom management start to fade away very rapidly. I cannot guarantee there will be no issues, of course, but what we do in AIM absolutely supports teachers who are struggling with classroom management. I remember my kids were all over the place because they weren't understanding. They found themselves distracted. But when I started to even begin to implement some of the strategies with AIM as I developed it, it was like a camera came into focus for the kids, and a lot of the challenges faded away. Absolutely, for sure. So, but we do offer the tips as well during our level 1 workshops. And we also, once you've taken level 1 workshops, can get access to some of our other specific classroom management workshops. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much for joining, and I hope to hear from you. As I say, I will get in touch. So thanks so much for joining me today. Au revoir. Merci.